If you're planning on going out to dinner tonight, wait a minute. Wait until you hear what's not on the menu. Bob?
All right. If you have smelled a rat, so to speak, watching our Not on the Menu series this week, you're not alone. Hundreds of South Floridians are calling Channel 4, wanting to know how we lost the restaurant protection we once had and how to get it back. Tonight, some answers.
We wouldn't want to get this in our beef stroganoff or something.
Keeping restaurants clean is no easy job, not for the restaurants or for the inspectors who enforce the rules. But for inspectors, the job is getting tougher. Now, as Channel 4 News has learned, the health officials who used to be responsible for shutting down dirty restaurants aren't even allowed to do that anymore. And now, inspectors are sandwiched between a lack of money and a mammoth work overload. In 1973, in Broward County, for example, there were 2,500 restaurants and 26 inspectors. Today, 16 years later, fewer inspectors are responsible for nearly twice as many restaurants.
When we see daylight coming in, we've got, again, the potential for rats to come in.
Broward County admits its restaurants are now only at what it calls a low level of acceptability when it comes to cleanliness. We've seen some examples.
Because of the roaches, you will get an unsatisfactory inspection.
Okay. Dade County says its restaurants are in much better shape. We couldn't tell you. The Dade County Health Department wouldn't let us follow its inspectors as we did in Broward. And Channel 4 News has learned exclusively that Dade County is still closing its filthiest restaurants, breaking the law to help keep restaurants clean. Remember, the legislature took that power away last year.
We haven't, been challenged, or we haven't had any problems either way. We're able to close our restaurants if needed.
Walter Livingstone is director of Dade's Environmental Health Unit. He says Dade County didn't know the county closure law was killed. And now that he does?
Well, we would not do it. I mean, obviously, if we're a state agency, and we're not going to break state rules and regulations. If the law says we can't do it, we won't.
County lawmakers in Dade and Broward were incensed to learn that the state had taken away local authority to close dirty restaurants. Most didn't even know it.
I'm quite alarmed that we've got to change without our knowing it.
Metro Dade Commissioner Harvey Rubin says the state's going to have to give counties back their old closure laws or devise a new system.
But in any event, I think that we need to have in Dade County, anyway, a system that would allow our sanitation workers to close a restaurant that needed to be closed immediately, so that no one person in the time it would take to get the state to act would go in there and possibly contract the disease.
It may be that members of the legislature didn't realize that this particular amendment flew by them in the final hours of the legislative session.
There's 120 of us running around the chamber trying to finish up our legislation, and things get through that sometimes we don't even know about.
Were you aware of it?
No, I wasn't.
Neither was Senator Lincoln Diaz-Balart. As a state representative, he, along with Goober and most South Florida legislators, voted unknowingly for the amendment that weakened local restaurant inspection laws.
I'm not surprised. No, I'm not surprised. It was not something that we were shooting for, but it's not surprising. And what we need to do now is to get it out.
Diaz-Balart says he'll file a bill to do that. And Goober, who now chairs a subcommittee reviewing all hotel and restaurant laws, says her committee will act.
I would say in April or May we will have a whole set of new laws.
Including local closure?
Including local closure, yes.
Now, if you want to make sure that what's not on the menu won't make you sick, put the heat on your county and state lawmakers to follow through and shut down dirty restaurants. And if restaurant owners can't stand the heat, they certainly don't belong in the kitchen. Due to the extremely high number of calls we are getting about last night's report concerning the International House of Pancakes, we want to repeat that the conditions we showed you were seen at the IHOP at 2781 North Federal Highway in Fort Lauderdale. The inspection results do not apply to any other IHOP restaurant. And we will, of course, be keeping tabs on this story and following health inspectors from time to time at other restaurants in South Florida.
Beyond waiting for the lawmakers to act, what can we do before we go? I mean, is it reasonable to ask a restaurant if you can walk into the kitchen?
It's reasonable as far as I'm concerned. You know, the restaurant...
Is it reasonable as far as the restaurant owner?
Well, I think that you'll find that some will and some won't. We got a call from one of the restaurants that we had showed you last night, and the man said, we're inviting people back now because we have to. So I think this that may be a good answer. Ask. All they can do is say no.
All right. Thanks, Bob.
Sure. That's got a point. As we promised, our Not on the Menu series continues this week. Broward County inspectors today taking us to a well-known Fort Lauderdale restaurant up for routine inspection. Today, it was Lester's Diner, a 24-hour restaurant on State Road 84 in Fort Lauderdale. Owner Louis DeGagas allowed us in, but abruptly changed his mind after Broward Health Inspector Paul Kita wrote up the very first violation. a filthy rag on a food preparation area.
So don't get involved and get your camera out of here. I'm sorry, stop it. Stop it, I break it.
But Dagagis had another change of mind and allowed us to stay. Kita then pointing out the grills at Lester's Diner were clean. As we've seen before, it was those hard-to-get areas that were not.
Can I use this utensil? See all the dirt that you have in here because this is not sealed? You know, nobody can clean in between that.
The grill's exhaust fan filters also needed cleaning, with dripping grease posing a potential health hazard. And ceiling fan filters had thick buildups of dust which could fall into food. Lester's meat saw and meat slicer were very clean, as was a small refrigerator, which had another problem.
Got a lot of blood here, right? Blood contains bacteria.
Yeah.
We've got salad items right next to it. Therefore, we have a potential foodborne illness.
Lester's was cited for storing poisons in food preparation areas, for having grooved and uncleanable cutting boards, and for not cleaning old, decaying food from its edges. A giant hole in the kitchen wall, bakery ovens that Kita said hadn't been cleaned in ages, and old, dented and rusted cans of baked beans that Kita ordered thrown out on the spot.
We don't use them anymore. That's why they're there.
Okay, I can appreciate that. I just need you to throw them out right now.
And the chef at Lester's didn't like being told that he couldn't leave large amounts of pork unrefrigerated prior to cooking.
If you try to do like Mr. Cat at the restaurant, you're dead. You finish.
And there's more. Lester's walk-in refrigerators had several old shelving units caked with decaying food, grease, and rust. And the danger of that debris falling into uncovered food, like these ribs, was obvious. To top it off, the owner was smoking in the kitchen during the inspection. Another violation.
Well, as far as sanitation is concerned, they leave a lot to be desired. Food protection and storage, there's a lot of potential for contamination of the food.
Lester's, however, did not have mice, rats, or roaches. Kita saying that Lester's Diner in Fort Lauderdale rates about a C-. He says the restaurant needs a lot of work.
Channel 4 News business reporter Bob Mayer joins us again tonight, continuing his series, Not on the Menu.
I almost don't want to hear what you have to say about this restaurant.
Stand by.
All right.
Shocking news tonight about another South Florida restaurant as our Not on the Menu series continues. This time, we visited a popular seafood eatery that the health department says ought to be closed down. We went with the Broward Health Department today on a routine inspection of the Crab Shanty at 2960 North Federal Highway in Fort Lauderdale. Peggy Moeller identified herself as the manager and allowed us in.
You can do it, but, like, you know, you're more welcome.
Okay, thank you. The dining area of the Crab Shanty at 2960 North Federal Highway looked very clean, but after the neon lights and the bubbling lobster tank, it was all downhill.
God, look at this.
Inspector Paul Kita pointing out a shellfish sink behind the restaurant bar, clogged with filthy water, 2 oysters resting at the bottom. And in the restaurant's kitchen, the violations were all over.
Evidently, these were out on a table yesterday. Could you throw them out for me because they can't be reused?
Even at the start, it was obvious that the Crab Shanty had big problems. But even as Inspector Kita was pointing out the filth, a call from a corporate lawyer changed the manager's mind.
Just please leave the kitchen. I have no authority to let anybody in with the camera.
We left, but Inspector Kita stayed, and he documented more than 30 violations at the Crab Shanty at 2960 North Federal Highway, including uncovered food throughout the restaurant's kitchen and coolers, condensation from a walk-in cooler ceiling dripping onto some of that food, poisons stored near food storage areas, filthy, uncleanable cutting boards, a dirty, rusted oven, deteriorating walls and ceilings, and rodents.
They do have problems with rats. I know they have at least one resident mouse. They are leaving their food open, exposed overnight, and therefore mice and other insects can eat the product that might be going onto our plate. They do have a lot of problems with plumbing. There's water all over the floor, coming out of broken sinks, coming up out of floor drains. It is an imminent health hazard at this point in time, and I'd rate it as an F.
If you had the power, would you close it down now?
Most definitely, I would close the establishment.
As we have pointed out, the legislature took that power away